You better be quiet when I beat on you or you'll wake the kids, and you don't want them to see this. So the kids are used all the time. Sexual abuse, you know, any kind of coerced sex is abusive. So, and that happens all the time in abusive relationships. Economic abuse, there's more to economic abuse than just not letting someone have access to the checkbook. I worked with a student here many years ago who was in a very destructive relationship, and she didn't have a car. Well, actually it was her car, but her boyfriend, who she lived with, drove it everywhere and really didn't give her access to it. So first of all, when she came to class, he would stand outside the class and he would just look at her and he would just wait for her. We had to call security on him many, many, many times because it was very intimidating, it was very threatening. And when she would get a job interview, he would drive her to the job interview because he wouldn't let her drive. He didn't trust her. And if she wasn't out back with him in what he thought was a reasonable length of time, he would go into that job interview screaming and yelling, "Where is she? What has she told you? What have you done with her? Would you hire her?" No. She had a terrible time getting a job. And if she found a job, he would call her 40, 50, 60 times a day. So, do you think she could keep that job? And let's just talk about the car. Can you get around in this county without a car? Has anyone ever tried that? How hard is it?
It's absolutely impossible.
It's impossible.
You have somebody that would do your life.
Yeah, you really can't. I mean, public transportation does not go between cities. I mean, so it's really hard. So just that in itself, you know, someone refusing, you know, not giving you access to transportation makes it very difficult to be economically independent, okay? She dropped out of school. I don't know what happened to her. I suspect it was nothing good. So you have the power and control in the middle. Then you have these things on the outside. Then in the black circle, you have physical violence. So the thing you have to know when we talk about partner violence is it's not just about someone getting hit. All kinds of things happen before that person is hit. So you are, by the time that first blow is struck, you are a different person than you probably were at the beginning of that relationship. Things have happened. You are probably isolated from your friends and family. You probably are feeling much less than you were when you started that relationship. So by the time that person hits you for the first time, much like in the video, she said, "I couldn't believe he hit me, and I couldn't believe he hit me again." Because it's right there. You can't believe. Remember, when we talk about partner violence, we're talking about violence in a loving relationship, in a relationship with someone that you think you might want to spend your whole life with. This isn't someone who has an anger problem. This isn't someone you met in a bar who, you know, is a casual friend. This is someone who you have history with. This is someone who you have a relationship with. Then on the very outside, there's a circle that says male privilege. And this is something that the theorists use to kind of talk about why so often women are victims and men are the batterers. So what is male privilege? You've talked about this probably a little bit. Do you think there is such a thing as male privilege? No? Let's vote. How many think there's such a thing as male privilege? Raise your hand. Okay, all right. Fair enough. So male privilege, you know, when I say that, people think that I'm putting some sort of judgment on it. I'm not. You know, male privilege, in my opinion, and it's my opinion, is something that does exist. I mean, men generally make more money than women do. You know, that's been shown over and over again. In terms of, look at our government, you know, there's certainly more men in government than women. So this is something, it just is. It's neither good nor bad. It's something that's been in our society for a really long time. I think it's changing. I think women are certainly getting on a more equal footing. But it's one of the theories that they use to explain why women are more often victims in a violent relationship than men are. And that's not to say men can't be victims. Men can be victims. So this is what we call the power and control wheel. The next thing you have to know to understand domestic violence is something we call the cycle of violence. And you do have a copy of this in your folder. So if you were on a date Anyone here in a new relationship? Anyone here in a relationship? Okay. So I want you to think about something. So this guy or gal that you're with now, this terrific person, if your first date, this person rang the doorbell, you answered the door, they pushed you out of the way, said, "Get me a beer, your skirt's too short, you look like a slut," would you go out on a date with this person? No. Would you have a second date with this person? No. So the thing is, it doesn't happen on the first date, does it? So when we talk about domestic violence and partner violence, we're talking about something that's very insidious, that happens over time. And we're talking about something that's cyclical. So you will have very wonderful times. She talked about that in the video. Didn't she talk about this great guy and this awful guy? You know, and she wanted this first date guy. She wanted this first date guy. She loved this first date guy. She wanted to spend, he was perfect. That's what she said. And he probably was. When he was perfect, he was perfect. But what happens in these cycles of violence is, in the center, you see that big denial. There's that big D. You know, it's how could he do this to me? I love him. He says he loves me. He couldn't possibly hit me. All these terrible things he says, he couldn't possibly mean. Or maybe they're true, because he loves me and I love him. So it must be true. So denial is at the very center of violent relationships. And then if you look, under tension building, so things that just start going bad. You might argue more. She said in the video they were arguing an awful lot. You might argue more if there are kids involved. This is the time in that relationship where mom is saying, you know, dad's having a bad time at work. Let's hurry up, get you cleaned up, get you to bed before dad comes home. So you're trying to make everything perfect. During the tension building phase, everything that the batterer ever said to you, every reason that he ever gave you for mistreating you or hitting you, you're going to try to fix. So if he said, you know, I don't like the way you dress, you're going to try to dress like he wants you to. If he says you're too fat, you're going to try to look skinnier. If he says you're too poor, you're going to try to find money somewhere. So whatever reason he gave during this tension building phase, you're going to try to fix it. Now, I have to tell you, there's nothing you can do to make it right, because it is not your fault. If you are the victim of domestic violence, you will never be pretty enough, rich enough, have a good enough job, love them enough to make them stop battering you, because it's not about you. It's about a choice they're making in this relationship. But during the tension building phase, you're going to try to do everything you can so that explosion doesn't happen. Okay? And then after the acute explosion, it's the honeymoon. So when you ask yourself, why would someone stay in this relationship? They stay in this relationship because it's not always bad. Because he goes back to being that great person that you love, that person that you want to spend your life with. Now, in terms of the acute explosion, what we know is that at the beginning of a abusive relationship, it'll be words, it'll be put-downs, it'll be intimidation, it'll be that kind of thing. So if you're at the beginning of a relationship and someone is choosing this kind of behavior, it's going to be words. The acute explosion is going to, it's going to hurt just as much, but it's not going to be violent. The one thing we know about domestic violence is it always gets worse. It always escalates because it won't work. If someone just uses words over and over again to try to get their way, eventually you're going to be all used to that, and it's not going to work. So in order for partner violence, in order for the batterer to get the kind of results he wants from that behavior, it always has to escalate. So what we know is these cycles, if nothing intervenes to stop them, it will always get worse. And what we know is that at the end, someone will die. So if nothing intervenes to stop the cycle of violence, at the end of this, someone will die.